Audio Jungle.
Hi, I'm Charlie White, and today I'm going to show you how to obtain a really secure fixing in plasterboard when you're hanging a heavy picture. And in today's video I'm going to be trying out the new Fisher Duo Power fixing. First time I've ever used this, so I'm pretty excited. So I've got to say, today's video wasn't planned, but it came out of a conversation I had with someone called Alexander in the comments feed below my last video on fixing into plasterboard. So Alex said in his comment on my channel, I'm planning to use a UX8 to hang a 6 kilogram picture in a plasterboard wall. Is this the right fitting, or am I better off with something more heavy duty? So I thought, let's put this to the test with this UX8 fixing. So I constructed a handy little mock-up this afternoon from some plasterboard that I've got lying around, drilled an 8mm diameter hole and inserted the UX8 fixing so that I could see how it performed. So my point to Alexander was that even with a chunky screw like this, if that's screwed into the UX8, the plug has not started to bunch up behind the plasterboard yet, so you haven't really got a secure fixing. And also you can see here there's quite a lot of play on the screw, so that's going to worry you a bit if you hang a heavy picture on it. The other problem you've got putting in a heavy screw like this is if you're not careful, if you over tighten it, it's just going to start turning in the plasterboard, as mine is here. So I said to Alexander his best option in this situation would be an anchor fixing like this. The only downside really is that you really need one of these setting tools, which admittedly only costs you about 10 quid. But the benefit of it is when the fixing is completely set like this, you've got this incredibly strong umbrella behind the plasterboard. You've got a screw at the front that you can even remove, and it's a flathead, pan-headed screw, which is brilliant for a picture because the picture wire or whatever it is you're hanging, is going to find it harder to slip off something like that than it would a countersunk screw head like this. Going back to my fixings box, I said to Alexander that there were various other things he could have used. Surprisingly, I even suggested he could use one of these screw-in plasterboard fixings, which I absolutely hate because they're hopeless for horizontal force, but they're better where the load is vertical. They're actually going to give you a reasonably strong fixing. My point about these fixings is if you've got any form of load that's pulling out of the plasterboard, like for example a curtain track, the thread will very quickly fracture the plaster and the fixing will pull out, as I demonstrate here. Other options included the grip it fixing, but again, tiny screw with a countersunk back in a plastic housing, so if I was hanging something heavy on that screw, I'd be a little bit unsure about using that fixing. So Alex very sensibly ended up going with the anchor fixing that I've just demonstrated here. But then he said something in one of his comments that actually got me thinking. His point was, when he was looking at using the UX8, given my point about the fact that it needs to compress behind the plasterboard, and that's never going to work when you're compressing the fixing and then releasing a little bit to leave enough screw sticking out to hang the picture wire on. He said actually what he was thinking of doing was using one of these heavy duty picture hooks, putting a screw through that hook and then putting that in the wall. That way the screw can tighten, you've got the compression, and then the hook is taking the load. So I'm going to have a quick look now and see how well that works. But I'm not going to use the UX8 because of the problems that you saw earlier with the fixing swiveling in the hole that we created. In essence, the plastic's just too strong to start bunching up in a 12mm thickness plasterboard like this. I'm going to use a smaller UX6 fixing with the 4mm diameter screw. So this time we've got a 6mm diameter drill bit. We're then going to insert our UX6 fixing. You might need to use a hammer, possibly in your wall. I'm then going to insert the screw into the picture hook and screw it tight. As we focus in on what's happening behind the plasterboard wall, which you don't have the luxury of seeing, but you can see in my video, the fixing knots up in the characteristic way that the UX6 does, and then at the front you're left with this super strong fixing which doesn't now even need the nails that come in the pack. Although if you'd wanted to, I dare say you could have put those in just to keep it central while you were tightening the screw. And it's perhaps worth pointing out for the sake of completeness that the grip it fixing would work just as well as the Fisher UX6 in this scenario. So I guess I've got to say a big thanks to Alexander for coming up with an idea that I hadn't really thought about here, which produces an incredibly strong fixing. The only other thing I would add, if you've got something really heavy like a mirror, it's a really good idea to put a couple of fixings in place rather than just one in the centre, because two fixings like this shares the load better than just one. Now before I finish today's video, I've got one more thing to show you. I've been wanting to do this for ages. Fisher have just recently brought out a new fixing called the Duo Power. I'm going to try this out right now on our picture hook to see how we get on with that. For this particular fixing we need an 8mm diameter drill bit. I'm going to drill a hole. I'm going to insert the same 4mm diameter screw as I did before. I haven't even gone tight with this screw yet, and the fixing is already swelling up in quite an impressive way. Wow! Look what has happened to that fixing. This is the first time I've ever used these fixings, and I've got to say that is seriously impressive. And actually much more impressive than the knotted up UX6 that I showed you a few moments ago. So what's the conclusion to all this? If you've got a really heavy picture to hang, Alexander's was 6 kilograms, the anchor fixing is a fantastic fixing and is going to give you an incredibly solid hold for your picture. But if you haven't got one of these setting tools and you've bought yourself some of these picture hooks, I strongly recommend you buy a bespoke plasterboard fixing like the Fisher UX6, the Duo Power, or the grip it fixing, and that way you can hang your picture with real confidence. So I really hope you found today's video useful. It'd be great if you could like my video below, and as ever, if you're new to my channel, I'd love to have you subscribe. You can do that by clicking on the link here.